Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Coliseum. I'm Jeff Keighley. We've got an awesome afternoon of panels for you, and two big PlayStation panels this afternoon. A little bit later, we've got Marvel's Spider-Man at 4 p.m. Pacific. But right now, we are going to talk about Ghost of Tsushima. This comes from Sucker Punch, an incredible developer up in Seattle. Did you guys see the big gameplay reveal on Monday night from PlayStation? All right, well, that's good because we've got much more to tell you about this game. It's sort of been shrouded in mystery for a while, announced back at Paris Game Show last fall. Hadn't really seen anything more in the reveal trailer, but now we've seen the game. And without further ado, I want to bring out the team from Sucker Punch to tell us more about it. Come on out, guys. We've got Chris, Jason, Nate, and Joanna. Guys. You guys are all decked out in the shirts. So
yeah.
Very impressive. On brand.
Yeah.
Well, this is a huge week for Sucker Punch. I've been a fan of your games for a long time, and this looks just incredible visually. And I got a lot of questions about that, but also just about what we saw in terms of the game and gameplay. But first of all, maybe you guys can all introduce yourselves and your roles at Sucker Punch, starting with you, Chris. And
Chris Zimmerman. I'm one of the co-founders of Sucker Punch and co-studio head, and I worked on a lot of the combat stuff you guys saw on Monday.
I'm Joanna Wong. I'm the one of the environment lead.
I'm Nate Fox. I'm the creative director on the game.
I'm Jason Connell, art direction.
Awesome. All right.
That's right.
Okay. True fan.
You crushed it.
No, this, as I said, is a huge moment for the studio. It looks, so beautiful and so different than a lot of things you guys have done before. And even when we saw the reveal trailer back in Paris, I mean, just it instantly grabs you, even though we didn't know anything about it. That's sort of all we got was that trailer, and now to see the actual game and gameplay is incredible. So let's start out kind of broad strokes. What is Ghost of Tsushima?
The Ghost of Tsushima is a huge open-world action adventure where you take on the role of a samurai inside of the Mongol invasion of 1274. And you have to give up who you are as a samurai and evolve your skills in order to fight back against overwhelming odds, finding a new way of waging warfare.
I'm in.
He practiced that.
I was going to say, that's right off of Aram's talking points. All right. So, you guys have made some amazing games over the years, such a diverse group of games. Infamous franchise I personally loved, and you guys did such a great job kind of evolving that, I think, even throughout the games you did in that franchise. Tell me about this time period, the decision to sort of focus on this genre, this type of game. I'm sure, on the whiteboard there were a ton of different ideas on what Sucker Punch could do next. Chris, how did you guys sort of zone in on this being the project that the team wanted to take on?
Well, first of all, we thought about what makes a great open world title.
Yeah.
And
so you knew you wanted an open world game.
Absolutely. Yeah. We thought that was what we really wanted to do as a studio, right? We've been doing the Infamous games. We loved them. We thought we could do something more. And what we concluded was that the best open world games are the ones that are based on a really strong character fantasy, like being a person in a place at a time. And we gravitated towards the whole samurai fantasy. We thought that we were fascinated by it. Nate, Jason, Joanna, and I, longtime fans of this.
Yeah.
And we thought we could really hit it hard. We could do something really special. And that's what Sony's about, right? Is doing something special. So we were really excited that we got the chance to do it.
So broad strokes, samurai fantasy. Then you drill down into the time period, the setting. It's a genre that certainly has been covered not only in games but in film, other popular media. Yeah. How did you zero in on sort of what aspect of the samurai fantasy you wanted to hone in on?
Guys?
Oh, I think one of the most awesome things that we talked about really early on was the world is just a beautiful place. Japan is absolutely stunning and beautiful, and it's just endless great film research that we could go off of, graphic novels, just TV shows. And there's places that visited this, and just no one's done it in our generation of games in the way that we were hoping to bring it, and that was really inspiring. It's extremely ambitious for us, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to do something extremely ambitious. We didn't want to. If we were a little scared, then that meant we were probably making the right decision. So we were pretty ambitious with it. And we were, bringing people to feudal Japan was, I don't know, just hadn't seen it very much. So we wanted to try it, and we're really excited how it's showing so far. So
it was neat. A lot of samurai stuff takes place in the Warring States period. Sort of pretty well explored, part of Japanese history. And when I remember when Nate and I were looking and trying to think, well, what could we do that would be fresh? Looking at the first Mongol invasion, I remember sitting in the office and looking up stuff online and learning more, kind of ideas of what happened, but then all the details just were lining up perfectly, right? It's like, wait a second, this is perfect, right? The invasion starts on this island, perfect for a video game. It's like this giant invading force, perfect for a video game. Super interesting time in Japanese history. It was. At that point, we were nervous. Right?
Yeah, this is too good to be true.
Yeah.
This is the first time gunpowder was seen in Japan in warfare. So imagine if you're on this island and you're seeing bombs and rockets for the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's spectacular.
Yeah. And so we're nervous because we're like, is it just us? It's like, we're super excited. We're vibrating, right? We're so excited about this, but is it just us? And we're nervous that other people aren't going to share that excitement. But so it's been really gratifying, I think, through the whole process of working with Sony as a whole to decide, this is what we're going to do next.
And you guys did a great job keeping it a secret, because I don't think anyone had any sense of what you were working on, which was a nice surprise. Some of these games are fantasies with samurais often have sort of a lot of fantastical elements, magic and other sort of things that are rooted in reality but then become fantastical. How much of that is in this game, or how sort of gritty and real is it compared to historical accuracy of it?
So this is a game that is inspired by history, but we're not doing a stone by stone recreation of it. This is an original bit of fiction. However, we really, really want to transport players back to 1274 and give them the feeling of being there. Open world games are great for this. You have this just freedom to explore, discover feudal Japan on your own terms, and that's where open world games come alive. And it fits with the fantasy really well, because a lot of this fiction, from comics to movies, is about a wandering samurai in the countryside.
Let's get into some of the stuff you're going to share here, I think for the first time with people, about some of the environments and the combat and whatnot in this game. Let's talk about the island and sort of how it looks, how you guys approach that. Maybe we can get a little bit of insight on the approach, I guess, visually to what you're doing with sort of the environment.
I think that the first thing, maybe you guys could talk about the trips you've taken to Tsushima.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We took a two different group in a different season. In the Mongol invasion happened in the fall. So we want really to see Japan's a beautiful country. We want to see when it is in the fall, how they look like, how is the foliage going to feel like. And then thinking about what are we doing over here, we are creating a time machine, literally. You hold the controller, you travel back to the 13th century. So we want people to feel this is real. This is the actual place that I went there, I see that. So that was kind of how we started.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Sending both of those trips down there was really eye-opening, because a lot of us had never been to Japan, and it was awesome getting to work with some folks from J Studio. Guided us around to some of their favorite places, including Tsushima Island. And then when we went to Tsushima, we actually I know Nate and I actually got an opportunity to sit on the beach. The actual invasion happened, and that was very surreal. It was breathtaking, beautiful, beautiful place, and it really did. From that point, it really did inspire a lot. I mean, we got back and we're like, okay, that and all of the samurai movies we watched, we're like, okay, everything in this game needs to move. There needs to be tons and tons and tons of wind, and that is even in the opening shot of our demo. You see, it's a fairly long shot, throwback to some Kurosawa fans, but. Everything in the frame is just this, blowing bamboo, blowing grass, and that's kind of a motto we have right now. If it can move, we try to make it move, whether it's cloth or grass or whatever. But back to the island. We go back to the island is actually the shape of the island. It's pretty.
Very identical.
It's very close if you look top down. It's very, very, very close to the shape of the island.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing on the trip, we went to Tsushima Island in the fall, take the picture of in the forest, the ground leaf picture, because they have those kind of age feeling, and we photo scan it and bring it back, put it in the game. You will see in the demo in the forest that you see the leaves all scattering around. That's the textures we actually took from Tsushima Island. It's very special to us because we want the people to feel connected and feel like this is real.
Yeah. And there's no substitute for being there. I think we've all seen lots of movies, TV shows, other content set in Japan. And the thing that, for me at least, is overwhelming about being there is just how green it is, how overwhelmingly green it is, that everywhere you look there is something growing. When I came back, I was there in the fall, and I came back and I'd taken pictures of all this stuff, and I did a meeting with the environments team to say, look, guys, no matter how green you got it already, it's not green enough. Take the green dial and twist it a little bit more, because that's actually what makes it feel like Japan.
Yeah, that was my initial instinct, was just the sense of motion and the technology that must go into sort of bringing this world to life. And it's one thing to see particles or fire, but when you have all these, foliage and blades of grass, and I mean, it's so majestic. Tell us a bit about, dreaming that up, but then actually bring that to reality technically. I mean, what did that take to make that a reality?
Magic.
Magic. Literally the word magic.
Is it procedural? I mean, how does that happen?
That's the right word, procedural.
Yeah.
We from Seattle, so thinking about Seattle has been raining a lot. Japan,
Oh yeah,
right?
Seattle, in the house.
Japan is even more very beautiful, moisture, and we call evergreen state. They're like evergreen country. We bring back and we think like how we able to add that very green, lush feeling into our game, and we developing tools. We making the assets. We make everything is possible to pushing for the hardware to able to kind of see what we see there today. So, for example, the Pampas field, and before we leave, and I got a rough number. What do you see in the demo, the Pampas field? That was about 500,000 of actual pampas flowers. Wow. So what are you doing is you really give you that ocean of a pampas, and when the wind blows, you feel like the wave hits you when you ride on a horse. This is kind of like the motion feeling. We want to simplify, but give you that big impact.
So it is sort of a simulation in many ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, when we did the Infamous games, if you run through Seattle and Second Sun, like every piece of trash on the street was placed by hand.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that for a game at the scope of Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
You have to invent a new way of doing it, something that lets us have and express our artistic vision for how we're going to make you feel like you're in Japan. But also, we can't place 500,000 pampas flowers by hand. We have to have technology help us to amplify our artistic needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and again, it's stunning what you guys were able to accomplish technically, and I can only imagine those simulations kind of playing out throughout the game now in so many different ways, and the characters obviously impacting those simulations too as you walk through some of these environments. Incredible. You mentioned, Nate, that this is an open world game. So, people always wonder, well, how open is it truly? Can I go everywhere? Anything I see, can I interact with? And, again, with these environments that are so procedurally generated in simulations, that's what gets exciting, is that you're going to sort of, be able to impact things as you work through them. So where can players expect to go in this game? I mean, is everything we're seeing sort of a playable environment?
Yes, that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
We're really excited in this E3 demo. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a spot where Jin gets on a high. It's right here on the screen right now.
Oh, that's timing, Nate.
Queued it up.
This is absolutely on purpose. We're trying to let everyone know that pagoda on the hill, those rivers leading to the mountains, the land behind the mountains, the Mongol boats in the bay, those are all places that you can go to and find stories in. And we wanted to make a game that you could see something and it would draw you to it and you would discover it on your own. It is open world for that reason. So we're not telling you exactly, go here and now do this, and then do this and do that. We want it to be your adventure as this wandering samurai.
Amazing. Well, yeah, it looks like quite the epic, and to think that, the gameplay will all take place in some of these environments is just, it's stunning.
That was the challenge for us, right? Is when we're thinking about taking everything we've learned building Sly Cooper games, building Infamous games, and then projecting it up, is how do we keep that quality bar that we demand of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That we considered to make it a Sucker Punch game. How do we have the polish and the controller feel and the relatable characters, but do that at a bigger scale? How are we going to change how we work as a company to deliver this experience? We've got that quality, but it's so much bigger a game. I don't know. It's been fun.
No, it's been awesome. I mean, I think that challenge, making a giant game at the scale of which we made Second Son at, that's the challenge. But we're also doing things like, as Joanna pointed out, like the Pampas Field being this, kind of stark sea of white. That's actually not the first instinct that you do, right? The first thing you want to do is like add weeds and more trees, and then suddenly it kind of loses its magic a little bit. So then we take like this image here. I love this image. It's you remove elements and be a little bit more minimal, and then suddenly it's even more striking, and you actually just removed things, which is quite nice, And you see the same thing at the end of this demo when we get to the duel, with all the leaves on the ground. It's not 1,000 red trees around you. It's one single one with a bed of how many is like leaves on the ground?
30,000 leaves. Over
30,000
leaves.
Live like particles on the ground.
And that's just, to me, like, you get to, obviously there's the combat and everything else, but just even walking through that field, I'm sure is just fun to just sort of interact with the simulation.
Yeah, you're playing the game sometimes at work, and you're just like, you realize that you've just been riding the horse around for a while, and you've forgotten you actually have a job to do. So.
And that's part of the beauty of, like Red Dead or these types of things, where it's just like the environment is so inviting that, even just looking at it, it's, it's a picture you want to sort of live in.
It's part of being a samurai, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing about a great open world game is that, and about building it on a real character fantasy is, it's about, what does it mean to you to be a samurai, and letting you do that, right? Letting you live that fantasy.
Yeah. You guys all talked about research trips. Sounds like almost everyone's been over there exploring. Tell us about the research that went into this and how you translated that into, the game. I mean, obviously, there are reference photos, things like that, but tell us a bit about the process of, creating this, stylized version of the world. Because I love the sort of painterly almost feel to the graphics. I mean, it's not, I don't know, how do you describe sort of the art style of this?
So Tsushima Island itself actually have lots of mountains, super dense tree.
Yeah.
So we look at it, we're like, we need to serve everything for the gameplay, right?
Yeah.
We want to bring the atmosphere back, but we want to go into able to have you travel all the way around. So what we kind of try to do is we creating different biomes and then different area location. Instead, we kind of, like Jason mentioned, make a super rich everything. 1 element, 2 elements, 3 elements. No, we simplify. Just simplify, make everything turn back. Just have one thing. Like moss forest you travel through, the moss is a key thing. The moss hanging on the tree, covering on the ground. You see the green everywhere. Old leaves is already buried into the moss. That's the kind of thing. And then the pampas, that is just only one thing, the pampas, with some of the rock and the tree. This is like the beauty of Japan. You see lots of those kind of Japanese art is also have that kind of very elegant feeling in there. So I think we are really trying to towards to that direction. Yeah. And with Jason's cool ideas. So that's how we get here.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's like our art team here is just so amazing at the kind of like that photorealism feel, But we push it a little bit, and we talk about like idyllic realism or a little atmospheric. But generally speaking, it's got this great photorealism base, and basically everything Joanna just said is like it's a pretty hard goal. Like it's actually easier to just put more stuff in. It's actually much harder, to be more minimalistic in your art choices. And then we also try to break things up. I also like this shot here because this stamp comes up, and it in the kanji there it says forest of no return or no return forest, and that kind of speaks to some of the themes. And like she was saying, like different biomes for different areas. And so we have themes for these different areas as well. And so those themes will match the art. And so that forest is a darker forest. There's a little bit of a darker story there. It's a lot of messy, nasty-looking trees as you go into it. It's a story about a moment of betrayal. So the theme is tied with the narrative and tied also with the art. That is our goal.
Wow. Well, it's absolutely stunning to look at. But of course, a good game, a great Sucker Punch game, has a lot to do with combat, interactions with this environment. So now we're going to shift over a little bit to talk about the action and the stealth and the combat in this environment, which we got a tease of. So let's talk about the gameplay loop of Jin and sort of how you use stealth, how you use combat. What was your approach to combat in this? Because again, coming from a more sort of fantastical, infamous, where you're jumping, flying, doing superhero-like abilities. Yeah. This is rooted in reality. So tell us a bit about what your vision was for sort of the combat and the gameplay.
Well, I think there's an emotional goal that we have that we're aiming for at all times. We can talk a little bit about how we explore to try to get there. But what we decided we really wanted to have was a feeling of intensity and danger. That it was important to us that you always felt like you were a couple mistakes away from being dead, right? That you had to pay attention. And that's true of the game we have right now. That if you stop paying attention, if you put the controller down, you're dead, really quick. And you know that when you're playing, that you're just a couple mistakes away from being dead, and you've got to be on your toes. And things come fast, right? That was another really initial thought for us, was that we didn't want to do a game where the bad guys were just kind of shuffling forward, taking their turn, waiting to die. We wanted to do a game where it felt like they were actually trying to kill you. And when everything clicks, we're still working on this stuff, right? We're not done. Yeah. But when everything clicks, you feel that. You get that sense that, oh my gosh, these guys are trying to kill me. And that pulls you in, right? That's part of the time machine. You don't feel like a samurai unless you feel like you're in danger. And Nate, maybe you can talk the story that we're trying to tell about Jin being forced to change by the Mongols. You kind of need to feel that as a player as well, right? You need to feel like the Mongols are forcing you to play a particular way.
It's absolutely true. Jin has incredible abilities right off the bat as an expert swordsman, which you've seen in these videos. And there's that tight, lethal application of this katana. But as he progresses through the story, he's inventing new ways to outsmart the Mongols. So he figures out, and frankly, this is kind of a Sucker Punch thing. We really love to give players the freedom of mobility to smoothly go where they want. And that includes, in the demo, we see Jin climbing up on top of this temple and using stealth, like right here, to move in ways that the Mongols don't anticipate, to get the drop on them. And this is something he wouldn't do when he starts out his story. This is something that he's growing into.
Wow. You mentioned sort of that sense of vulnerability that often, for some people translates into, stealth, right? There's sometimes games that are extremely difficult, and there are other games where it's like you just have to be subtle because you can't sort of, as a one person, you can't overtake this army, all by yourself. So how stealthy will this game be? I mean, are you sort of treating as their stealth sections and action sequences, sections, or I'm sure it's probably a little more nuanced than that, but how much of this game is sort of, avoiding detection or combat versus engaging?
It's kind of up to you as a player. Okay. That there's a lot of player agency there, right? And when we talk about people playing the game, there are people who are going to approach it different ways, and that's great, right? That has to be accommodated. We have we'll have people whose natural tendency is to just go full samurai, where they're just like, whatever, I'm coming in. I've got a meter of steel here. Let's see what you guys have. And then there are people that are kind of more full ghost, we would say, where they're like, no, I'm sneaking. They're not even going to see me. They're not even going to see what killed them. And so there are parts of the content that we do that are more amenable to one of those styles or the other, or something in between.
Yeah.
But as a player, it's important that you have that choice, right? You're deciding what sort of samurai to be. That everybody is forced to grow, right? Everybody, just the overwhelming numbers of the Mongols and their ferocity and their skill is enough that you can't just cowboy through everything. But it's up to you to decide what that means, and whether that's about mobility, or whether that's about stealth, whether that's about inventing new ways to fight them. You're going to make that decision as a player. That's what pulls you into the story, right? I mean, the game's about the story of the game is about Jin being forced to change, right? Being in a position where he has to sacrifice everything he's always wanted to be, the perfect samurai, because that's not enough. That everyone around him who has held on to that identity, can maintain the idea that I'm a samurai, this is what samurai do, they're all dead, right? He's on his own now, and he's not. He could make that same choice, and he decides not to. He says, like, no, I'm not. I'm going to grow. I'm going to be more than that. I'm going to find a new path. And the game only works if, as a player, you feel the same thing, right? If Jin's story and your story playing the game are the same story. And so combat plays a big part in that. It's the thing that forces you to change. That you might start off the game just mashing on square, spoiler, that button swings your sword. Yeah. That's exclusive content, by the way.
There yes, I got some.
That's okay.
Square is sword.
And that'll work for a while, right?
Yes.
But it stops working. There are too many.
But then when you press circle,
something else happens. Yes. So, and there's a prize for guessing what X does. So you're forced to change too, right? And that fact that the experience you're going through, the fact that you're being forced to change, parallels Jin's story, really helps you, get pulled into it.
Wow. We saw some interesting combat sequences there, obviously with multiple enemies. Tell us a bit about the combat, chaining attacks. I mean, since none of us are lucky enough to play this, I think here at E3, you're going to have to paint a picture for us. Yes. Talk about the fluidity of the combat and the sword play, and how the smoothness of that, because the environment looks so beautiful and majestic. I imagine you want that same sort of fluidity to the combat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it starts with obviously it's all motion captured, right? And so we've been iterating hundreds of attacks and styles that we've tried. We made contact with a guy in Seattle who's a student of ancient Japanese fighting styles, Dave Shimaru, and he's worked on all kinds of stuff. He's a great guy. And we sort of started there, right? I mean, so there is a basis for what Jin is doing that is grounded in the truth of how you would fight with a katana, but it's got to change a little bit. It's a game. There are things that are important to you if you're actually fighting with a sword that just don't make sense if you have a controller in your hand. And our goal is clearly to make the controller melt away so you feel like you're swinging the sword, but you have to compromise a little bit. So we've done versions of the game where it's basically one-hit kills on everyone, and like that.
Really? Wow.
And
I think that's a really important aspect of the samurai genre. It's not just, okay, swords are out.
Yeah.
There's always this spectacular moment of two guys eyeing each other. Yeah. Who's going to move first? It's kind of like that game, where you have your hands and somebody slaps it. Dude, I don't know if you ever played that, but you're really tense because your friend keeps whapping the hell out of you. And that's part of the standoff between two samurai. And then, boom, the sword comes out. And then, you're fighting. And then there's the time afterwards when people are kind of bleeding out and falling down. All these things are present to give you the full featured experience of experienced samurai combat. And we put it in this demo, and we're very proud of it because it represents not just the exchange of swords, but also the feeling in totality, including one of my favorite things Jin does is he sees a wounded Mongol who's suffering, going to die, and he just puts him out of his misery in a very business-like way because he's a soldier. This is what he does.
While he's having a conversation.
While he's having a conversation with Masako, because it's what he does every day.
Yeah. My favorite part in the mud pit area when they're doing the fight is when Jin one hits that guy, and the other Mongols are like, "Oh, they take a step back. Like if you watch the video again, they're
react.
They react back. They're like, oh, that's not what that's not how we thought the story was going to end. And it's cool, right? Because that gets at the humanity of the enemies as well. We're trying to make them real people, right? That they're actually trying to kill you. And of course they're scared. Of course they're not just rushing in. They've got to dial up their courage to go at this guy because you know it's kind of a meter of razor sharp that he's holding there. It's scary for him.
Question for you on the combat and how it will evolve throughout the game. You know, you said rooted in reality, but at some point, you know, it's a game, so you want to have, you know, upgrades and sort of new abilities. Tell us about that sort of ramp for the character throughout the game as much as you can.
It's about change, right? I mean, that's the story about being forced to change. And so we're not really talking about details so much, partly because they're still evolving. We're not done. We're still inventing new things, trying new stuff. I've got some ideas in my head I'm really excited about trying when I get back to Seattle. But first, it's an open world game, right? And your expectations are in these gigantic open world games, you're going to have stuff that evolves.
Yeah, progression. I mean, there's narrative progression, and then there's mechanical progression, which is really important to keep you feeling like, oh, I have these new ways to experience the game. Inside of the demo we're showing at E3, there's a very clear example of this. I don't know if you saw the grappling hook that he uses. That's not something a samurai would use off the bat. That's something that he's come to. And this is a real good example of how the game will mature and change, and your ability to engage with the enemy in different and evolving ways is going to keep it fresh over time.
Yeah, and another thing we've shown that you can see if you could go back and look at the stuff that we've got is Jin's costume, his armor is changing as he evolves, and that's kind of has symbolic meaning, but it also has mechanical meaning. That this what we call the Ronin costume here is different because he's different. The stuff we showed in the debut trailer, again, you see a couple suits of armor there, and that has mechanical value as well as kind of narrative value.
How will the environments change as we sort of go through the game? Because I mean, I imagine even just it feels like the sun and the lighting is so beautiful. So I mean, how dynamic is sort of the world and the environments, and how can that sort of evolve?
That's the master of lighting.
Okay, master of lighting. Take it away, Jason.
So one of the biggest challenges of making this game is going from Second Son, when we had very static-based time of days, to map whatever the emotional map of the player is, right? So if you're in a sad part of, Infamous, you would gray or something like that. Well, when we moved to this game, we were like, we're doing a dynamic time of day, because all really good open world games do that, and there is so much benefit to it. It kind of makes you feel like you're in the world, things come and go. And then we're like, all right, we can't stop there. We're going to do dynamic weather, like having rain come in and go away instead of it just being a checkpointed story missions or something like that. We're like, no, let's just go. Like, it's a hard enough problem to solve to do the lighting, dynamically. Let's go ahead and tack on the weather states as well, because they're all infused, right? Like, if it's really rainy, your lighting conditions are going to be very differently. And so in our tech, it's really cool. It actually, things grow. Like, if it starts raining, things get wet. Everything in the world gets wet. We can dial the wind up and down and have windstorms come in, and we can have the puddles will grow that are on the ground, and things will get muddy. As you slop around in combat, if you roll around a bunch in combat, you will just get completely brown muddy. You'll be completely drenched, and if a rainstorm comes through, it'll kind of wash you off as well as all of the blood on you. So that there's a lot of ways in that we're trying to bring a level of just the world is changing around you.
Plus, this is really important for getting lost in the moment, right?
Yeah.
That sublime beauty of nature, especially when it's dynamically happening. I've been up on top of mountains, and then the mist clears, and you go, oh man, it felt like a little snowflake moment that was just my own. Yeah. I'm sure you've experienced this in games where it just happens dynamically, and it's beautiful.
You just marvel, and you just stop, and you're just sort of like, wait,
totally.
It's like, wow, that's
and
cool.
It's a great juxtaposition where you see this beautiful landscape, and you understand, okay, this is Jin's home, and then you juxtapose that with chopping somebody up with your sword. This really brutal situation.
It's a really good contrast.
And so it's two great tastes that taste great together.
No, again, everything you've shown is just, I mean, it's just even the clouds and the mist. It's just
The clouds are a great example. We don't paint those.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're simulated. It's actually all dynamically simulated. You never see the same clouds twice.
Oh, really? Even all the clouds are all there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part because we used to
Yeah.
paint them all by
Yeah,
hand,
yeah.
and to get the perfect feeling, and
Right.
part of this creating a romanticized, beautiful duel. So we have not only just procedural skies. That sometimes I don't think that they look that great. Sometimes, like some games
Right.
do a great job with it, and sometimes not. But we have like procedural sunbreak tech.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like where we can put like a streak on the horizon, and like that's going to be our sunbreak, and the colors
So
can
is
change.
it kind of a full day-night cycle?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
wow,
yeah, it
it just
cycles
keeps
through.
going through it.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
From a sort of cinematic storytelling perspective, I'm curious. This looks so beautiful, and I'm sure everyone's God of War was amazing with like one shot throughout the entire game,
Yeah.
things like that. What can you tell us about sort of? I know you don't want to get a lot of details about story and characters, but in terms of at least the devices or methods of how you're telling the story, can you tell us a bit about sort of your approach to that?
Well, we always try and keep the story inside of gameplay. Video games are great when you feel like you are participating in the story versus watching it.
Yep.
Inside of the demo, you see Jin really not saying a lot, right? It's almost like you can treat it like a silent movie. I mean,
Right.
not really, but it's pretty close because we're trying to keep the action on screen. You hear the monk yelling inside of the temple. Masako is kind of making up a plan with you when you're in action, and then she betrays you, and the betrayal is expressed even while you're dueling. Inside of the demo, we go interactive, and Jin is saying, you were a good friend. She's saying, give me a monk. If you're the player and you just want to attack her right off the bat, you can. We're putting the story inside a space where you can interact with it. And so that's chief. All of our stories are, first and foremost, inside of activity.
So so characters talking to them. So you said more minimal, you think, in terms of sort of dialogue and conversation, because it's Jin is a man of few words, or am I putting words in your mouth?
He's not a super chatty guy,
Right.
but characters do talk. I guess what I mean to say is that it is a story that you can appreciate just by watching what's happening versus somebody saying something to you, and you kind of have to build an image in your mind.
Yeah.
Why do that when you could build the actual problem or the story on screen in action, in gameplay? Like him following this leaf to find the temple. It's physical. You look at it, and then you see the tree, and then you see more leaves blowing. It's visual.
Yeah.
It's in the world.
Wow. Well, again, like even this sort of frightened me. You just want to just look at it. It's beautiful. Well, we have one more clip for you guys that we're going to show. Do you want to set up? This is a
This is
mocap,
like a little
right?
behind-the-scenes peek at sort of this juxtaposing some of the mocap that David Ishimaru did for us with the actual realization of that in game that you saw on the gameplay demo that we did.
Awesome. All right, let's check
So
it
we'll
out.
see if that gets queued up.
Mocapping Ghost.
So this is from the actual gameplay demo that we did, and then we'll cut here in a second to see David doing that on our mocap stage. We have a mocap stage at Sucker Punch. Yeah, and this is Billy getting his ass kicked, so this is a good one. So. That's our animation director. So taking one for the team.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, again, that's side by side, yeah.
There you go.
It's going to be so cool when all these are all chained together.
Yeah, we can't wait till I
It's
actually
like-
let you play it, Jeff. So.
Oh. In time. I've
Not
only
this
asked a few
time.
times.
Not
But no,
this
I got to
time.
say, this is, it's so exciting because, across worldwide studios at Sony, I think all of the teams just continue to keep pushing in new directions, and I feel like this is such a evolution of, the types of games Sucker Punch has done. Looks so majestic and beautiful. What do you guys think? It looks pretty good, right? Yeah. Well, I know there's lots of hard work ahead wrapping this up, but I personally cannot wait to get a chance to play it and see more of it in the months to come. So thanks to
Thank you,
Team
Jeff.
Sucker Punch
Thank
for
you.
giving the Coliseum a little
everybody
sneak
for coming.
preview.
Thanks,
of
everybody.
Ghost
Thank you.
Tsushima. Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.